to start with some meditation. And I'm going to share the screen at some point, but just let's settle into our meditation position. So a few breaths, just connecting with breath and awareness. As we usually do, just grounding in the body. A few breaths, bring our awareness to the crown of the head and just slowly moving down the body with breath and awareness to settle the mind, our awareness a little bit more into the body as opposed to just being kind of moving through the senses. Allowing breath and awareness to soft release, relax and open the body where we find any tension. Couple of breaths just to be with the sensation of the sit bones on the cushion, grounding our energy a little bit more, earthing our mind a little bit more again in the body. Softening, especially through the back of the throat, the jaw, the neck. Straightening up the back of the neck kind of helps to align the whole spine for the sit bones all the way up through the crown, that line of energy. Special place, sit bones all the way up through the crown, is where we have what we call the central channel in our more subtle body. So that's where the central and the side two channels. So when they're kind of floppy or constricted, mind gets dull. So we try and bring a clear line, soft but firm line of energy, imagining that for the sit bones all the way through the crown. And keeping soft and open through the shoulders. Shoulders open down the back. Belly soft. So in a couple of words, labeling at our level is so helpful. The words just to check in with. How is our mind? What's the quality of our mind right now? A couple of words that might come up in your mind just to describe the quality of your mind right now. Without judgment, just observing, being aware. Label that. Mind, emotions, feelings. How is it doing right now in a couple of words? So whenever we meditate, that's a good way to start, you know. When we wake up in the morning, we sit down to meditate, get in a position and just checking gently the quality of our mind, like start becoming what we call our own therapist. Without judgment, criticism, just checking up how we're doing, what's going on. That's kind of our starting point. From there, we start to try and move into a slight transformation of the mind. You know, that's what meditation is. Transforming our mind from negative to positive states of mind, gradually, gradually. As I mentioned last week, we all, as humans, share the same desire for happiness. Underlying all our actions, behind all our actions, is this wish for happiness. Absolutely, you know, clean, clear. No question. So let's just a couple of breaths. May I be happy. As we inhale, just on the breath, wishing ourselves happiness, that aspiration, building up that aspiration. May I be happy. And as we exhale, may all beings find happiness. And then we move into, may I find everlasting peace and happiness. Breathe that thought in. And exhale, may all beings find everlasting peace and happiness. How does that feel? A little bit different. So this class is very much about tuning more in deeply into that place of everlasting peace and happiness. How do we get there? And why are we not there yet? Why are we not quite achieving that in our lives? Why do we get locked into maybe mental pain, physical pain, concrete way of thinking, emotional states of mind such as anger and desire? Why do we get locked in there? In what ways does that block our potential for peace? How can we move out that sort of concrete jungle of thoughts, feelings, emotions we sometimes find ourselves in? How can we, with our mind, open up pathways to peace and happiness? How can we find a way that instead of our minds being on top of us, our emotions, appearances, situations in our life, how can we more and more be on top of them? So this is what the Dharma's about, you know, opening up those pathways to deeper understanding, deeper insight in our mind. We have innate awareness. We have an innate wisdom. Buddhist tradition talks about gross level of conscious, subtle levels of consciousness, and more subtly, most subtle. So the subtler ones are in the nature of wisdom. You know, even when we're dreaming, that's a more subtle level of consciousness. We still cling, we still have appearances, but they're not as heavy. They're not quite as locked in the dream state. There's a little bit more, we could say a little bit more wisdom functioning. As long as we're locked into senses, the appearance of the senses, locked into emotions around that, it's very hard for our wisdom to wake up. So we need to learn how to dive a little bit deeper into the psychology of the mind. We need to navigate that. Be brave enough to go beyond what's just appearing day to day, minute to minute in our mind, and just clinging to that appearance. Otherwise, it's very difficult to find peace, real quality peace in our happiness, just in our sort of daily life, our daily habits. So alongside listening to teachings, we have to always have a way, a method to wake up our wisdom nature. Otherwise, we can't really feel the teachings, you know. We hear them one time, it sounds great, and then after a few times doesn't really resonate, you know. We need to always have a sensitivity when we hear the teaching so that it wakens up our wisdom. So since we're at Land of Medicine Buddha, I always combine teachings with some kind of mantra. Mantra's a great power to waken up our wisdom nature, our compassionate nature. Activates these more subtle levels of mind that are in the nature of knowing, the nature of healing, the nature of kindness, openness, spaciousness. I mean, we all need that, you know. And we're very fortunate because, you know, the tantric teachings are available in this world right now. As from the Buddhist perspective, Tibetan Buddhist perspective, they're quite rare, you know. Not all the Buddhas teach Tantra. But the special quality of Tantra is that, you know, on the basis of the foundational path, we can achieve more enlightenment a little more quickly with tantric methods, with power of mantra, visualization. This is special methods to access our deeper wisdom nature that's kind of mostly on sleep mode. So we need a powerful method to wake that up. So from here, since we're at Land of Medicine Buddha, we do a little bit Medicine Buddha meditation. So we imagine, like, as we often see around here, just our whole mind gets kind of absorbed in the experience of vast open sky. Everything around us becomes like sky-like. Just imagine absorbing your body and mind in that experience. And from that skylight nature in mind, as we see in the image here, like a rainbow appears spontaneously, kind of magically, the image of Medicine Buddha. The aspect of Medicine Buddha having it's more like a sapphire blue colour, seated on a lotus moon cushion, just like a rainbow. The body's made of pure wisdom. It's made of this rainbow light, translucent light. Even though we can't see, we try and feel the presence of this radiant light, just like we see a rainbow. You know, we try and mentally see that with our mind's eye. But it's not solid or concrete. So when we open our wisdom mind, our wisdom eye, reminds us that nothing is solid or concrete in reality. Bringing our mind to that mindfulness, that awareness, just like the Buddha appears now. Actually, all phenomena don't have this concrete, solid nature. So we're trying to, so does the Buddha reflects our wisdom nature, our potential. To achieve our purest, clearest nature. But it's beyond concepts, beyond confusion. So how wonderful it would be if I and all sentient beings were to achieve this deeply peaceful place, deeply blissful place, and with that thought and kind of a sense of bringing all beings, our friends, family, community members, all beings as vast as space spreading out around us, with that thought, we take refuge in that, the outer Buddha, the transformed completely into that deep, peaceful, blissful place, and our inner potential to do that. That's what we do with refuge, outer refuge, inner refuge, reminding us our Buddha nature. We have that potential. So we recite once in Tibetan, twice in English, the prayer. Sangye chodan sogi chognam la janchu bardu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chinso gibe sonange drola penjir sangye drupar shuk. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. So just sit with that thought. Does that verse sort of mean to you? Or just let it sit for a moment. And then to, as I say, awaken our deepest, more deeper wisdom nature. It's always with us, it's always present. But again, it just needs, we need to heal the grosser levels of mind, purify them. So this one can open up like the lotus, our wisdom can open up. It's not just, as I say, always on this sleep mode. So mantra does this, it helps to touch something in us. The syllables, mantra in Sanskrit, the special karmic connection with Sanskrit in this world system helps to open up the mind. And we imagine being purified, light and nectar coming through our crown, purifying our body, speech, and mind, healing our body and mind as we chant the mantra. Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Raja Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Raja Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Mahabekanze Raza Samugati Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Mahabekanze Raza Samugati Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Mahabekanze Raza Samugati Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Raza Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Maha Bekanze Raza Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Ma Bekanze Raza Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Ma Bekanze Raza Samugadi Soha Tayada Om Bekanze Bekanze Ma Bekanze Raza Samugadi Soha. Okay, so let's just come out of the meditation when you're ready. Okay. All right, welcome back to this class. What's your name again? Michael, okay. Right, so this week we're going to go a little bit more into why we need wisdom. Talked about that a little bit more last week, just a few more points. So we tend to always notice that we need compassion or patience more in our lives. Yeah, that kind of is kind of clear. But sometimes, you know, the special quality of the Buddhist teachings is the clarity, the wisdom teachings. You know, so actually from the very beginning, the Buddhist path, Lam Rim, gradual path to enlightenment, that's what we practice in this tradition. There's an emphasis on developing our wisdom, you know. I mean, of course, at the same time, we develop compassion, kindness, but actually, the more wisdom we have, we can develop compassion much more quickly. When we understand our confusion, our basic confusion more clearly, how we're not achieving stable states of happiness, right? When we understand that, then slowly, our compassion for ourselves, compassion for others is more. Because right now, I think, unless we understand the wisdom teachings, where suffering comes from, where problems come from, it's very difficult to have a kind of, far-reaching compassion. We tend to have more like a loving kindness, yeah, wishing others to be happy, more at a kind of, superficial level, which is still good. We still want to have people have comfort, you know. We still want them to be comfortable, to have nice food, to have a nice place. We all want that. Everybody wants that, you know. But it's not really, it doesn't satisfy, you know. That's why I think eventually we come here, because there's a level of we tune into, there's a level in our life where we're not getting satisfied. You know, that's a sort of type of renunciation, that term we use in this tradition, renunciation, a disenchantment with things, even though things on the outer level might be relatively good, something else is not happening, you know. I'm not achieving kind of an inner peace, in my life. Something I'm doing is not working. So this is why we have here, and so this is what I'm expressing in this tradition from the very beginning, how the path is set out is developing these two wings together. For a bird to take off, for us to take off in our spiritual path, we need to kind of recognize that we need these two wings. And that's what's missing often in other approaches. And not to say we're better or something like that, but it's just I find like when I met the Dharmas, Mary Beth, she'd been a long-term student, the wisdom teachings are mind blowing how clear they are. I mean, in the beginning, it's like, what are you talking about? It's like a maze, you can't quite get your head around. So we have to listen for a while. We have to reflect for a while. Then we can bring it into our meditation. But wow, the wisdom teachings are mind blowing. I mean, even my guru, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our guru, Rinpoche would, I have a slide somewhere here, but my slides are popping up in a funny way here. I think I've just got too much going on with my screen. So Rinpoche, he had one monk in our tradition, is it Venerable Sering? We used to live together in Aptos. I used to live, Lama Zopa Rinpoche had a house in Aptos. And he and Rinpoche, he mainly for 20 years has been writing the Prajnaparamita. These are the perfection and wisdom sutras in the Buddhist tradition in gold. You know why? Because once we awaken that wisdom nature, it's the most precious thing. I mean, over and above bodhicitta. I mean, alongside bodhicitta, I should say, there's this other aspect, the compassion wing, which moves into this quality bodhicitta, which is incredibly precious. I mean, we all have. So why is he writing that in gold? Does that seems like a waste of time, waste of money? But every day, I mean, I saw Venerable saying he makes many prayers before he does it, makes many prayers after. And Rinpoche wants that done for our organisation, for FPMT. We have many, many centres around the world. And why is it done? To pray to create the causes and conditions that all beings awaken these precious insights, that precious insight, the most deepest insight into the nature of our mind, wisdom realizing emptiness. So he writes it out with that motivation, with that purpose, and also for the success of the organization, because that's really the ultimate goal of our organization, is for all beings to achieve that quality in mind, that wisdom realizing emptiness. And again, not so much we're focused on that this class, but this mind of bodhicitta, awakening mind that has incredible capacity to guide all beings out of suffering and the causes of suffering, samsara. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche himself also wrote the sutras in gold. When you think at Rinpoche's level. So we do it to create merit, to create the conditions for that to ripen in our mind. And it also kind of showing that there's nothing more precious. Even the gold we write on, it's not as precious as that experience. So it's hard for us Westerners, we're so caught up. And especially, as I say, we're in this kind of 5-star samsaric lifestyle in this area. So it's like a pure land, almost. It's like the pure land of samsara. So it's hard to us to kind of really recognize there's something much more precious that we can than achieve than anything that we can find in our normal lives, in samsaric happiness and regular stuff. Even as students, we have to remind ourselves that all the time because we have a lot of comfort, a lot of freedom. We're so fortunate. I mean, but yeah, fortunately, we still have our stuff. So that reminds us that things aren't perfect. So our stuff's good. In the beginning, our stuff is very helpful because it moves us, inspires us to find a solution. Just like the Buddha. Diane was asking about Sakadava. We think about the life story of the Buddha, he was like us. His life is very princely. Our life's very princely. Even though we're busy and all that, we are princes, as I said last week, in this human realm. When we, being in this area, we have to work for food, clothing, and shelter. But some places they work for that and they still don't find it, or they barely make ends meet. It's easy to see all that in the news these days. So we need, but that's as the Buddha discovered, he was protected in the kingdom. And he, even though he had that great 5-star luxurious lifestyle, and it's, as I say, it behooves us to think about the Buddha's life, read it. It blesses our mind, Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, when we read biographies of holy beings, especially the Buddha. It's very moving when we're new to the Dharma. It's very moving when we're in the middle of the Dharma. It's very moving when we're enlightened, because it's really showing it's showing us what we need to do, you know. We might not be able to leave the kingdom of our lives altogether and go off to the forest. We're not asking us to do that, but there's a way where we need to remove ourselves from, you know, wrong ways of thinking, wrong concepts, wrong ways of being in our life that are not bringing about this potential for everlasting peace and happiness, a potential for a credible wisdom that, as the Buddha said, why he left, he wanted to find a solution to, you know, birth, old age, sickness, and death, you know, a solution to, even though he's in the kingdom, there's not a satisfaction that he's getting from that, you know. And there's still people are still having loads of stuff, emotional problems and sickness and, you know, all number of things, you know. So that's not, this isn't, you know, living a life of comfort. Protecting yourself in that isn't the answer, you know. Is there something more stable? So that's why the Buddha, you know, he became disenchanted with that lifestyle, and if it decided to live the life of a spiritual seeker, you know. So in our lifestyle, we can still be spiritual seekers. You know, we're not able to like go off into the forest and I don't know, you know, maybe we've got a forest here, you know, but all of a sudden we see Patrick there in the forest. I've given up all possessions, you know. Well, and also that's not what we're asked to do either. We have to actually develop what we call an inner renunciation, an inner letting go. And that's possible within our lifestyles right now. But we need to be very clear about what that is, you know. So, anything else I wanted to say? So yeah, just we need this wisdom wing. Because even with the greatest aspirations to help others, sometimes we don't get far. And sometimes we go down a rabbit hole, make things worse, yeah? Because we don't have the wisdom to really often see what we're doing, you know? So we need both. And that's what's really special about this path, clarifying that for the very beginning, the need for wisdom. So this class, what's the next one? Yeah. I just wanted to clarify again the meaning of what do we mean by dharma? You know, like dharma. We always say like we need the dharma in this tradition. You know, dharma. We think teachings. You know, but I find it quite helpful just to clarify what we mean in Sanskrit. Is the dharma is the term? You know, for dharma. What does it really mean? Well, it means to hold, maintain, or support. That's actually its literal meaning. So what do we mean there? Well, what we mean is we're kind of Dharma, spiritual teachings, is something that holds us up from suffering, from negative, challenging, distorted, confused states of mind. So that's what Dharma, and you know, of course, we've got Buddhist Dharma, but you can find Dharma in many things, you know. Once we understand a little bit more, I think I needed to understand the Buddhist path to then see where Dharma is in other things. Because if we try and just bring that to too many things at the one time, we might get confused. That's why it's very important to kind of find your spiritual path and kind of go deeply in that. Then we can see the Dharma and more things, you know. Everything can be a little bit more of a teacher, you know, when we're grounded in our path very clearly. So Dharma, when we listen to Dharma, we want it to be something that holds our mind up from confusion. In this particular instance, when we're talking about the wisdom teachings, hold us up from mistaken concepts, holding us up from our concrete, stuck view of reality. It's also something that sustains and supports us in our spiritual development. The Tibetan word for Dharma is Chu, you know, and that has another little bit different connotation, which is still good, you know, it helps us. That which transforms the mind from confusion to clarity, from a not knowing to a knowing or wisdom nature, or which corrects or improves our mind, emotional mind, conceptual mind, you know, any level of mind, you know, improves our anger, desire, improves negative states of mind, you know, improves them, moves us out of those, holds us up from those. transforming the mind from positive to negative. So negative to positive. You know what I mean? So yeah, just taking a moment, so that's what we want Dharma, that's what Dharma needs to be doing. So is that our Dharma practice doing that? We have to keep checking in. Sometimes we can get a bit lost, and then maybe it's not doing that. So is it doing that? How much has it done so far? Sometimes you think, oh, I've been practicing Dharma for so long, my mind's not changed much. But it's amazing, when we look back, when we didn't know anything, not much, just those few things, those few insights, how much it transforms our life. Understanding not to kill. It's huge, We all probably killed some sort of bug or insect or something when we were young. So just knowing that is like massive, holding us up from suffering, not to lie, not to steal. Knowing a little bit more the wisdom nature of our mind, a little bit more how important it is for us to practice kindness. Never mind others. How important it is for us not to harm, never mind others. So small things like Dharma, how much it's incredible how much even at that level, it's holding us up from suffering, small things, Suffering, and we mean suffering, experiencing problems and challenges, not so much just in this life, but future lives, because we have continuity consciousness, which I'm not going to kind of go into too much, but we need to kind of do investigate that a little bit further, Our mind it doesn't just end at the death time. So next slide. So what are we doing? This is what I wanted to go into this class, the 4 wrong concepts, and then moving into the 4 seals of Dharma. So these are really reflecting where we are now. When I met the Dharma, I always found these so interesting. It's kind of like it really summarizes what we're trying to move through when we practice the path to enlightenment. Or it's really the essence of the Buddha's path. And it was very much reflected as well through how the Buddha left the kingdom, how he left the kingdom and how he sought happiness, because he recognized where in life, where in our mind, we're grasping at straws. What does grasping at straws mean?
It means trying to take an object for more than it is. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, anything. Yeah.
Your hands go right through the straw.
Yeah.
So there's nothing really to hold on to there.
That's it. So I think this really shows, if we go into them more deeply. And we always, so the other thing as well is when we have a tendency, I always want to say this as Westerners, to kind of beat ourselves up. So when we look at the wisdom teachings, we're trying to like just in a kind and gentle way. It's like unpacking our confusion. Like when you go to a therapist, they help you to try and unpack. It's like therapist. Yeah, yeah. So you're trying to unpack what's not working in that person's life for them. Why are you not getting this stable happiness? This is what the Buddha's saying. Why is that happening? This is why it's happening. These 4 points, right? In a nutshell. How are we preserving, holding on to our conceptual confusion in what way? This is what this is pointing out. What needs to be purified or corrected in the mind? This is what's pointed out. So even when we're at therapists, there's no point in sitting there beating yourself up. Oh, I'm so bad because I'm doing this and I'm doing no. That doesn't really help. We just want to hear and hear some wisdom in a gentle space. Try and start applying it to our mind. Recognizing this in our mind. Why, again, these are showing why we're not really touching our wisdom nature. What's blocking that? What mental states? What kind of pathways in our mind are we stuck in that's blocking that wisdom nature, that innate nature that we go back to, by the way, at death time? Talk about that a bit more next week. Clear light nature. That's in the nature of wisdom. But as I said in the meditation, it's on sleep mode most of the time because we're caught in these 4 concepts. So we do need to kind of have the mind as we approach Buddha's teachings that wants to go below the surface. So we're not just hoping for, expecting the straws to kind of there to allow us to float. How come every time we grasp at straws, we just sink? We're sinking in the mind. You know, that's what's happening in a way. Sinking into the first concept. Right? How are we sinking? Seeing the impermanent as permanent. So that's again the Buddha's lifestyle. We'll go back to the Buddha. I think, he had so much clarity and insight already because he was already, a great spiritual being when he came down into this world. He was a high level bodhisattva. So that level, they have so much clarity, and insight. So he saw, his father kept him in the kingdom, didn't want him to leave because when he was born, this hermit had come down to the kingdom and was kind of crying and said, your son's either going to be a great, king or a great spiritual kind of leader. And he was crying because he said, I'm too old. I'm not going to be able to receive his teachings. So the king kind of freaked out and thought, well, he. Needs to run this kingdom when I die. So he kept him in the kingdom, kind of locked in there, didn't want him to see any suffering. So it says that even like the king would have, as soon as people started to get old, he would remove the staff and get young ones. As soon as people were sick, you're not taking care of it. So he just surrounded them with all this kind of comfort and the illusion that this was happiness, because he knew his son was very intelligent, very sensitive, very compassionate, and he didn't want him to become like a spiritual hermit, leave the kingdom. So he protected him around that. But then at some point, the Buddha thought, like, well, I want to see what's out beyond the walls. So he went out, he managed to sneak out with his attendant or, the person main one that took care of him, one of his servants. So how did he see? We try and see that in our life with fresh eyes. What did the Buddha see? Because we are really surrounded with that in our lives in a way, that protection and comfort, luxury. So he saw old age and he was like, what's that? Oh, then he said, well, that happens to everybody. It's like, oh, really? He saw it because he was only 26 at the time, the Buddha. So you don't, you're not really tuned into old age at that time. He saw sickness. And of course, the king of protecting. He's like, well, we all get sick at times. The body suffers. So, and then he saw death because at that time in India, as it is now, death's kind of out in the open. You got the Ganges in India. Have you been in Varanasi? Yeah, so it's everywhere, isn't it? The people die, they float in the Ganges, they die. So it's all out in the open. Whereas here, it's all kind of covered. Somebody died, oh, can't talk about it. So and we just sort of, mostly don't talk about it, or we don't know how to deal with it. So in many ways, apart from the basics of the body and the funeral and all that, so like that, and he was like, wow, so this all finishes like that in this kind of suffering, difficult way. And for those of us who have been around people who pass, it's not easy. Death's not easy. So again, even whether we're new, been practicing for a long time, we have to think this is what we call true suffering in the Buddhist tradition, First Noble Truth. The Buddha saw that, he recognized that as true suffering, right like that. There's a problem here with the way I'm relating to life. So then he saw a hermit and he's like, who's that? And he's like, oh, that's somebody who's seeking liberation, who wants to break free from the cycle. And he's like, aha. So he went back to the kingdom. I think he thought about it for a while and then he sneaked out one night. Even though his wife had just given birth to their child, their first child, you think, wow, did he not care about the baby? you know? But he loved his child, he loved his son, but he felt like he had a bigger purpose in this life. So very brave because he had this. We don't even have to renounce a kingdom. Can you imagine all that responsibility he left? The pressure his father. That's really brave, actually. Most of us don't have that. When I became a nun, I didn't have any of that to give up. It was just me, myself, and I. So he had huge amount of pressure on him to become a king. He was a father, son, did all that. I mean, so to give that up's very, very brave, really. But he'd had this disenchantment. He knew there was something else not working. And this is what he saw through impermanence. He thought everything here in this lifestyle is impermanent. It's changing and shifting all the time. And even at the level of the second one, there's no real happiness in that. There's no real satisfaction. I guess some of us might have heard that before, but we actually have to sit and meditate on that to get a movement in the mind, to start to see how we are clinging to things, people, objects, situations, emotions in our life as if they have some sort of concrete reality, as if they have a power to bring about a sort of peace and happiness that we all want, and that they're not doing that. I mean, impermanence. So, yeah, I think we tend to feel, isn't it? We feel our body's concrete. We have a sense of permanence going on all the time around our body. Although we say, yeah, I'm getting older and I know I'm old and all that. But if you think we do, there's a sense of permanence sort of in there in the mind, isn't there? In our relationships, in our friendships, with our body. So when we get sick, it's like, what happened? We get a fright. Or when we lose our job, oh, what happened? um, so even though we kind of know on some level that things are shifting and changing, night becomes day, day becomes night. The seasons change. We kind of know it, but we're not really in harmony with that. So because we feel there's an innate sense of permanence going on, I think, in us, that things are solid because we identify we're solid, our emotions is solid, our thoughts is solid, our body in some ways a bit solid, even though we know it's shifting and changing, but it feels solid. Yeah. So there's a solidity in our life that's not in tune with shifting and changing, which is going on all the time. There's gross level impermanence. Just going to touch on these briefly. Gross and subtle level impermanence. What's gross? What's maybe some examples of gross level impermanence? Anybody? Yep, the landslide happening when that happened. Fruit molding. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Weather. Yeah, buildings collapse, an earthquake, because of course that all builds up, doesn't it? But then it's like boom. um, a little bit less gross is like just the general aging of the body, just as well. It says in the lamb room, if we aged overnight, we'd freak out. If we were like 20 and then we woke up and we were 90, we would totally freak out. Wouldn't we? So it's just as well. There's in that level that's happening. Our physical strength declining, friendships changing. Friendships change quite quickly sometimes. So sometimes it's a little gradual, but sometimes it can be quite quick. But so that gross level, what they say is pointing to a subtle level impermanence that's going on all the time. That again, we're not quite connecting to with our feelings, our thoughts and emotions, our appearances, what's appearing into our minds, not connecting with that more subtle level impermanence. Even the grosser level's hard for us to accept change sometimes. Um, like our thoughts, when we do these meditations on breathing, then we step back and we see our thoughts are just shifting and changing all the time. Our emotional world's a little bit different from maybe when we came in here. Slight shift, change. Our body is a little bit different. Maybe we're a bit tight here somewhere, but so, gradual shifting and changing on a cellular level, on a mental level, all the time going on. But why? So why are we not there? This is what we're so but still we want things, we kind of want, we feel we want, we have a hope and fear around wanting things to be permanent, feeling things are permanent. We feel like that.
Me, I spend a lot of energy on a daily basis supporting those actions.
Yeah.
What I mean,
But feeling things,
yeah, I spend 80% of my time doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Feeling that things are going to be concrete by the end of it or something. Building can be good. There's a process where it's shifting and changing. Yeah. Anyway, so it's kind of like, how are we, where in our lives are we grasping at a sense of wanting things to be permanent when actually they're not? And how are we suffering in that process? How does that become a struggle for us? And we're going to look into that a little bit more. I'm really just here pointing out kind of where our concepts are a little bit confused. Again, this conceptual confusion that's going on at the moment, where we're not quite tuned into what's really going on the first level, what's blocking our wisdom nature. I mean, even at the level of our thoughts, I mean, there's no way they are concrete or solid. But wow, don't we feel like they are at times? That's like the most obvious way for it. I think our body and mind and our feelings, our emotions, my anger, my fear, my anxiety, but it does change. But in the moment, whoa, it feels real. And we cling on to that feeling like real. This is me, in that moment. So what the Buddha's saying is they're temporary states of mind. And of course, they block our wisdom nature. And when we go deeper into it, but why sometimes it's happening is because we're not in touch with it. We get upset when something changes because we're not in touch with the changing nature. So we get upset because we're not ready, we're not prepared, our mind's not open for that. So these afflictive emotions are coming because we're not in touch. We're in these wrong concepts. We're not in touch with reality, the reality impermanence, you know. The reality that, the next one, um, kind of identifying with things that we think are bringing happiness, but are actually resulting in suffering. They always use this example of the chocolate cake, right? um, and this was very much the case in the Buddha's lifestyle. He could see that the sensory pleasures they don't have a capacity to bring everlasting peace and happiness. We're not saying just throw the chocolate cake out and don't enjoy it, but be realistic about what's going on there with your experience of the chocolate cake, your experience of going to the beach, your experience of that nice drive in the car, your experience of that scenery. I'm not saying don't enjoy it, but that's not of itself shifting around our sensual pleasures or comfort from one thing to the next is not bringing about peace. It's not activating our wisdom mind. It's actually blocking it. And especially the more we kind of just rely on that, we cling to them. It's block, 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 more and more sleep mode of the sense consciousnesses. So, um, and if we really investigate the nature of that chocolate cake, that lying on the beach, getting a suntan, or even just going for a walk on the beach. In the beginning, it feels like nice. I love it. I like this chocolate cake. I like these French fries. I like this croissant. But if it was real happiness of itself, then if we had more chocolate cake, we'd be blissed out. More of you. If that's happiness out there, then the more chocolate cake you have, the more happy. Yeah, it should increase. Happiness should increase. Yeah, we tried. We try. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. This is what I've got this kind of slide here, I think. Where is it here? I mean, this is Rinpoche's what Rinpoche would say. But they're singing that because it's true. He's touched a truth. And I mean, a lot of musicians, singers, songwriters are very poetic, so they touch certain truths. It's true. But we need to even go deeper in there and find a solution to that not getting satisfaction. So it's really true. And this is the key point, if that going for the walk on the beach, lying in the sun, that beautiful view was in the nature of happiness, then the more we have it, we should be more happy. It's logical. But the more we have of that, first of all, we touch a sort of boredom level, and then it becomes like quite unbearable. If we had like one piece of chocolate cake, okay, that was nice. Not quite as good. The beginning's nicer than the end. The first bite is like, wow, wow, wow. Second, third, fourth, still good, but it's not quite as good, you know. Then we go into the second piece and we're like, okay, I can just about maybe manage a second piece, but I'm getting fed up now. Then we go into the third piece and it's like, whoa, I'm really feeling sick now. Or maybe you're on the fifth piece by the time you're feeling sick, maybe you've got a bigger capacity. I don't know, you know, but but this is a key psychological point, you know, with this one. Go back to the first that slide there. Um, it's like grasping at straws. We're trying to find happiness there, but actually we just end up finding suffering, discomfort, what we call the suffering of change in the Buddhist tradition. So again, this is what we have to apply. It doesn't mean don't go enjoy your nice walk, don't do that. But that if we just involve ourselves in that, it's like this cycle of to keep changing things up, you know. This is a very important one in developing what we call the mind of renunciation, you know, disenchantment with just the essential, you know, what we feel like we're getting through the senses, you know. Whether we're new, whether we're old, we need to kind of, you know, we all need to get to a little bit more clarity with that, you know. So we take less refuge in them. And more we think, wow, but I've got this beautiful wisdom nature. I need to spend time on this because this doesn't just benefit me, it's going to benefit so many other people. I mean, when you're around somebody, a saint, you know, we all get blessed. When there's a holy being in the town, you feel it, you know. As I mentioned last week, one guy, Ed, you know, he just came here and he's like, well, he comes every week and he meditates. And one time he was like, I came here and it was like even more peaceful because Chado Rinpoche was here, you know, he's one of our Tibetan lamas and he could feel the peace, you know, it influences your mind. So it's kind of like once we recognize, once we take hold of this thought that we have our wisdom nature and we have this opportunity to change and transform our heart and mind into that, it's kind of like a responsibility. So when we take bodhisattva vows, you know, a few of us here have taken bodhisattva vows, 2 or 3 of us online. That's what our bodhisattva vow means. I've taken responsibility to open this wisdom nature, to open my compassion, because that can really benefit others. I've taken responsibility to dive deeply into these 4 concepts, understand them and correct my mind, purify my mind so it becomes pure wisdom, becomes pure peace. So that one, grasping suffering as happiness, that's a really big grasping at straws one. Yes, Diane. Oh, Diane's got a question. And if anyone else has got a question, please put your hand up online
I feel like I'm really stuck on this one.
Yeah.
And the reason is when I go and say take a walk by the ocean and see an amazing sunset, I'm filled with awe at the sunset. And is that awe in the nature of false happiness or suffering?
Mm.
I feel really stuck on that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know my way out of it.
Anyone else want to share on that point? Mary Beth, I thought maybe ask Mary Beth.
Yeah. I think for a long time, I don't do it so much anymore, but what I would notice was the moment you shift from the happiness to the dissatisfaction, right? That's the thing to watch for. So you go out and you're kind of grumbling, and then all of a sudden there's this gorgeous sky. And you notice in that moment, oh, that's what release from suffering feels like. And so you start to kind of lean in and remember what that feeling is. You can't grasp it because the sun sets and it's over. But just to really notice, because then when you like practice that muscle, you get it a lot. You know, you get it in flashes during the day. So it's more noticing that moment of transition, you know, rather than the feeling of awe itself.
Does that help?
Yes, I guess it does. I mean, in a sense, that feeling of awe stays with me. And it feels like, oh, in a sense, that feeling of awe does stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, I feel like it's an opening to an understanding of an intelligence that has created this earthly world that we're all traversing through. So I guess I'm yes, and I still don't know how
Mm-hmm.
it's not defined as suffering. I can't figure that
Yeah,
one out.
so there are conditions. It's not, that's what I'm saying. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater right away, you know? When we say this, like, okay, I'm off to the forest and I'm just going to like not do anything here, you know? What we're trying to say here is that simply relying on that. So if you just decided my spiritual path's all about going to the beach and just watching the sunset, that's not going to work, you know? However, there are conditions like going to watch a sunset, looking at the sky, remembering our cellular wisdom nature. If we come with that approach, like if Mary Beth was saying, okay, I'm not going to sit and meditate all day on my wisdom nature. I can't do that, you know. So we create conditions around us. That's a condition that can help us. So there's things that we come here because it helps our mind, you know. So we're not Buddhas yet, you know. So what I'm saying is it's very much a little bit how we. First of all, what I'm just clarifying here is some of the concepts. We can get the one with the chocolate cake, you know. I don't know, you know, at some point, there's even ways you can transform the chocolate cake, you know, so you can open your wisdom nature. So actually, we can start to use things to open our wisdom nature, you know. So looking at a sunset, looking at the sky can help, but it's not it's not going to be the main thing, because you can see, even though you look at, you're in a sense, oh, but maybe, you know, if somebody, you couldn't get home at night, you might get freaked out. And that sunset, you know, and also if the sunset was there all day, you'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen that already, you know. It's just like, oh, the sunset, and it's only going to last for 10 minutes, so it's really precious, you know. And then that level, yeah, it does help our mind. But if it was there all day, you'd be like, yeah, been there and done that. So you see, so there is a way where our mind gets fed up, tired of that experience. In and through the senses right now for us mostly results in some kind of like boredom verging on into a kind of suffering or dissatisfaction, you know. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying don't catch the awe and use it to kind of and catch the, you know, I mean, many meditators go out and they meditate in the sky and the forest because it reminds them of things that they want to bring into their mind, you know. It's not concrete and solid because we're always in this concrete, solid sense of self. So it brings us out of that for a minute. So use that condition, but it's not going to be the cause of your changing your mind. It's a condition. Does that help? It's a condition, not a cause. You know, the cause is realizing our ultimate nature, but we need conditions to get there. Yeah, we need like coming to this place, being blessed in our mind, seeing nice views, being in quiet places. So we need all those things. So it's a condition that can help our mind reach the wisdom nature. But even that condition, still, if we just rely on that, we get bored. Do you agree? If you went and watched the sun all day, you wouldn't be in awe like 24/7, 24/7, 24. You'd be like, okay, I think I'm done with this now, you know? So, but we could, yeah, and this is where we build up a skill in our practice, you know? So we using things also to help us understand this more. So you can go there and think, well, this is great. It's helping my mind to remember, to understand my vast, infinite nature. But also, when I think about it, if this was 24/7, it wouldn't be so, you know, my mind would start to get bored and fed up. There's you know, a kind of this dissatisfaction, a kind of doesn't satisfy as much anymore. Would you agree?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to comment too, and just
Yeah.
hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah.
That and a lot of this comes from my work and studying Pema Chodron and
Yes.
specifically, but I think Buddhism would say to embrace the awe as deeply as possible, to the full experience possible, but not use that experience as the relief of suffering. That the awe is not to not suffer. And then in the next moment, if you stepped on a shell and cut your foot, it would be to embrace the pain of that as well. And in the next moment, it's something else. So the grasping is trying to hold on to the awe as the state of relief of suffering, rather than just the next state in the moment and the next state in the moment and the next state in the moment. So it's more of the resistance to the pain of life, and using happiness as a way to resist that, rather than it being our connection to truth, to oneness, to whatever it is that's happening. Yeah, just curious your thoughts too.
Yeah, I think once we've got a rounded, Pema Children's wonderful at, kind of like hitting the nail on the head, I think we're getting there as we go through the 4 concepts. But how do you let go, Like, how do you do, we're just, in what mental space, how do you use difficult situations? It's kind of almost like another teaching, how we're using challenges, difficult situations on the path. We call that Lojong. That's what Pema Chodron, she also teaches that very well, So yeah, that is another way of doing it. But then we also need to understand what that nature is when we let go. Like what our wisdom nature is. So the Galut is just this slightly different style of teaching the same thing, and we all need a little bit different methods, So I'm kind of getting there as we go through these 4 concepts, because there is a whole teaching on using everything in your path, embracing every opportunity for deeper spiritual awareness, for sure. But here we're just kind of trying to get the nuts and bolts right now of how we're not, how things aren't quite working, as opposed to like what's the solution to that. So I'm trying to get a wee bit more clear on that. We're there. And Teresa has raised her hand online. Please, Teresa, you want to share or?
Yeah, I think it's a very, very good question, and it was really hard for me to wrap my brain around it because it is a whole paradigm shift. And the thing that helped me the most was in a retreat with Alan Wallace. He talked about is it called eudaimonia? Eudaimonia? Like there's hedonic pleasure and then there's I don't know how to say the word. Anyway, one is like you get a sense of purpose and one is like limited pleasure. Anyway, I'm saying basically exactly what you're saying, but that's where
Okay.
I got eudaimonia. I think that's what it's
Eudaimonia. I've
called.
never heard of that term, but maybe you could put it in the chat because I'm not really.
Okay, I'll look for it. I'll look for
Yeah.
it.
And sometimes teachers come up with different terms to express something, specific in the Buddhist teachings, just for us to understand more. But anyway, we're all just processing. There's a lot of processing we need to do with these teachings, and it's not like you just listen to a couple of classes and like, okay, I've got it. Not at all, isn't it? We're we're processing this for, this life, next life, and gradually we get there. Seeing, grasping the impure. So again, we're just talking about how are we not relating to reality, things how they're appearing in our minds, our emotional world, that's not bringing about this peace and happiness. What are we not quite getting right? Just clarifying that, these 4 concepts. The next one, seeing seeing and grasping the impure as pure. Anyone know what that one is? I hope so. I don't know. Yes, yeah, that's right, Diane. Yeah, Diane said the body. That's correct, So this is the big one. I mean, there's other things as well, because even we can say that about sense objects. We think, oh, that's pure happiness out there, that chocolate cake, but it very becomes something unclean in the body, right? And our body, as soon as you go below the skin level, it's not very pure, even depending as you get older, even on the skin level, it's not so, but still we think we have a sense that it's clean, even though we know we need to clean. Yeah, because we have to clean the body all the time, as soon as you shower, it starts to get unclean that next minute, so it's kind of what I call this is a kind of byproduct of what's going on in the mind. It's like showing us that actually our reality is not as pure and clean as we think it is. Why is that? These Buddhas, it's hard for us to know because we can't see, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I would say a realized being, my guru. He didn't have to bathe like we do, and there was no smell. Actually, Rimshi, never. I mean, there might be a sign of like, of course, if Rimshi banged up against something unclean, there would be a bit. But no, Rimshi, for holy beings who have kind of morality, a level of morality, they don't have, they've developed a kind of what we call this. I was talking about gross, subtle, and very subtle levels of consciousness. So they've got, on the basis of their kind of subtle or very subtle consciousnesses, they've developed what we call a wisdom body. A body that's stainless, a body that comes from our stainless nature of consciousness. So ultimately, our consciousness, they say, is pure, it's free from the stains of grasping, clinging, attachment, ignorance. That's its ultimate nature. That's where we're trying to go to. Its nature is pure happiness. So when you've opened that up, you no longer create a contaminated world. You don't create a body that's old, sick, dying, needs washed all the time. We have this inner body, and you could feel that around myself, who lived at Rimshi's house. I mean, Rimshi was on a different planet. Doesn't sleep, doesn't lie down. Only the last few years when Rimshi had like so many things going on with the body. But it was kind of absolutely mind-blowing to be around that experience as someone who didn't have to do any of that, and was always vibrant, bright, totally there, totally compassionate. I mean, if we don't sleep, we get grumpy. What I do. We need to sleep because our conceptual world is so strong, so concrete, we get tired. That's why we need to sleep. Because we're clinging onto things. We get attached to things. We feel we are, our emotions are concrete. I mean, sometimes we don't, I'm not saying all the time, but we get tired because we're in a gross level of consciousness, and that needs rested. So when we sleep, we go into a more subtle level of consciousness, which is more rested, more clear. So when we wake up, we're like, oh, I feel better now. And then we start again. Then we start again. It's just on and off, on and off. Rimshi didn't need to do that. He was in these deeper levels of wisdom all the time. So as you're saying, every moment is a teaching. Every moment you're using every moment to develop and awaken and open your wisdom nature. You can utilize that. Every moment is bodhicitta, pure bliss, happiness for others, So, and that was absolutely, isn't it? Mary Beth spent, I mean, it was mind blowing, yeah. Rimshi's lifestyle was completely opposite to ours. It really was. And that's a sign of a saint, a holy being. Their life's totally different because they're not in those concepts. They're in what we call the four seals, which we're going to jump to just in the last part of the class. They're in that all the time. But we need to recognize, even though when I was around Rimshi, it felt like that was so far away, that experience. But we have to recognize this is our window of opportunity in the human realm. We are precious human rebirth to at least make some strides to break down a little bit some of these concepts in this life. We have intelligence, we have these incredible teachings, we have teachers, we have so to create a bit of more space in our life to break through them, Otherwise, we're just in this cycle all the time, So this is and this is what we call renunciation, really, a little bit making a move in our mind to move out of these a little bit, move towards these beautiful states that are embodied in practitioners, even some sangha, never mind gurus, some sangha. We've made making some strides in these directions. You become a better person, not just good heart, but also more skillful with others. You're able to guide people a little bit better towards longer term happiness, not just putting a band-aid on their problem. Without wisdom, we just tend to band-aid a lot of the time other people's stuff. Of course, we do, if we have good morality, good ethics, we're definitely, if we have that example, then we help others with that for sure, But there's still a far-reaching way that we can help people, if we develop our mind. The last one, seeing, grasping that which is selfless is having a self. So we're going to talk about that a bit more, but that's the root fundamental problem, which I just wanted to show you. I'm not going to do that. Where's my next? Oh, here we go. We did that one. Okay. So many of us, just to finish off, How many of us have had teachings on the wheel of life? We're not going to go deeply into that at this class because I'm not prepared, but you have, yeah? Oh, good. And how many of us online? Stan, did you have that during the DB with Geshe-la? Did he go over the wheel of life?
I think so to a degree, but I'm
Yeah,
not sure
yeah,
you
to a
went
little
into-
bit. You got
Yeah.
some little bit into it.
Right.
Anyone else had teachings on the wheel of life? Yeah. But Teresa, for sure, yeah. Anyway, we're not going to go deeply into it. I just wanted to introduce it for those of you because this should be, you know, we usually see this somewhere. This will be up here somewhere here, yeah? The wheel of life, Diane, do you know where it is? You don't have one. Oh yeah, Gompa chunk. Well, it's usually somewhere up in the centre. It's in that small Gompa, which actually usually what you do is you find this. It's usually outside the temple. You know, so we actually have it at Vajrapani just before you walk in the Gompa, it's on the door outside. You know, it's not an object, it's not so much like a holy object where you go, you know, we all come in and we prostrate. You know, you don't prostrate to the wheel of life because that's the scenario we're in, you know. This is the conceptual confusion. This is a visual image of the conceptual confusion that we're in. So at the time of the Buddha, of course, many people couldn't read at the time of the Buddha, you know. So the Buddha asked, I think, guess one of his disciples, there's a couple of different stories around it, but basically the essence is the Buddha asked one of his disciples to make a visual image of kind of samsara, you know, this cycle existence, this conceptual prison that we're in, you know, right now, because we know that visually things help us, you know, and also he wanted people when they went into the temple, whether they could read or not, to at least see, get an idea. It's a bit like when you go to the doctors and they kind of have images outside of the body and graphs and all that. This is a graph of an image of what's going on in our mind, you know, in an inside way. So just in a nutshell, you know, I call it our self-created stranglehold. What's a stranglehold? Patrick, yeah. But we're doing this ourselves. We're holding ourselves very tightly in this wheel, thinking, yay, this is great, man, you know? But it's not. That's why we've got Mara saying, no, it's actually a really scary place, you know? Mara's the Lord of Death. So he's holding us. We are held by death, uncontrolled death. So the guy on the outside, Mara, he's holding us, you know. What's that showing? We are in uncontrolled death. How many of us can really say, I'm going to be fine at the death time? We might think that in a way. Even Mary Beth's like, oh. I mean, we don't want to depress each other, you know. It's not to get depressed. It's just to, you know, we have to come with the idea like, I want to see things clear, you know, and then start to make movements, you know. So we're in this kind of stranglehold, self-created stranglehold of death and rebirth. You know, that's what the Buddhists say, you know. Consciousness is in there. And so I just wanted to point out 3 here. So why, you know, those 4 wrong concepts, and the last one just touched on grasping at a sense of a self. When what was it? Grasping at self. That which is selfless is having a self, you know. Grasping at a kind of we know what, you know, we've all heard it, a solid, independent sense of self. Me, myself, and I. I'm there, and you guys are all over there. And by the way, I'm kind of a wee bit more important than all you guys are. You know, roughly speaking, you know, even though we have children, we have this, there's a sense of, well, less, but there's still a sense of our kind of, you know, our importance, who we are, our independent, our sense of duality, being separate. Diane, were you going to say something? No, you're agreeing? Kind of.
I think you answered it.
Okay. Yeah, so that's what that one means, you know, and that's the root, that's the really interesting. We need to find it really interesting. Curious part of the Buddha's teachings. It's not that we're bad because we do this, it's just because we're in the habit of doing it. It's a strong mental habit, strong mental concept of feeling like, not just on the feeling level, and also on the you know, our mind, our consciousness, that appears a sense of self, isn't there? If I say, Dave, You go, yes,
Yeah.
here I am. It's very strong, you know. And there you are over there, and I'm here, you know. So what the Buddha said is if we break down reality a bit more, as we're going to go when we go through the four seals, you know, that I is completely an illusion. It doesn't exist at all. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't, we're nothing. We're just a blank slate. We're zero. Get back to zero, you know, in a sense. No, what it means is that basically right now, how we're perceiving, how we're feeling, how we're identifying with a me, my, and I is mistaken. That's wrong. That's the basis, that's the root of all the confusion. And that's what's kind of just, you know, what we have here visually in that first, this one, you can see yeah, you can see. So here, this one here, I just made it bigger, you know, this one here, this is where the wheel starts. Really, our confusion starts with the blind man. We are blinded by what we think what we think an I is, and what actually how we exist. You know, we're not seeing that clearly, like a blind man. Our wisdom nature is blinded, covered, like the sky is covered. You know, we like to go and see the sky. It helps us. You know, it opens up the mind. Our mind is vast like that. But right now it's covered by the clouds, and the main cloud is, what is it? The main one, root delusion. Maybe not Mary Beth, she knows. Anyone online? Stan, what's the root delusion? I'm going to.
I think you're referring to the sense that things exist as we think they do. The general confusion that that are we are something beyond our actual mind that's creating everything.
That's right, Stan. And what is the main delusion, the main affliction that's causing us to perceive a wrong view of self?
The main affliction, the main delusion.
The root delusion, root affliction.
I probably know this, and I'm
You
not coming up
do,
with
but
it.
it's okay. We'll get someone
Sorry.
else. Teresa.
Self-cherishing,
No,
maybe.
no. That's hard for me because there are different ways we approach this. So you could, so there's a main, when I say affliction, you know, a main delusion, yeah, there's those two ways of saying it, you know, really. The root cause of suffering, what's in the mind, what virus is in the mind?
The imputed
Okay, Mary Beth. There you go. Ignorance. So it's hard because we do hear it expressed different ways, and I know you all know, but then now we really know. It's good when you get asked and you don't know, then you're going to remember the next time. Isn't it? It's like, okay, I need to get that one down the next time the teacher asks. The
That's what I
root
thought when I said we think one thing and we are not that, and that's why.
Yeah, exactly. You do. It's just I knew that you kind of know it,
Yeah.
but we also kind of need to really know the terminology a little
Yes,
bit. This
indeed.
is where we think we know, and it's wonderful. I mean, thank you everybody for coming because I'll tell you when I have to teach this, wow, you know, to get your mind a bit clear on it. You know, it really helps. Even though I'm not clear on everything, but it tidies up your understanding, and we all need that all the time. You know, because we do. Yes, our innate nature is non-conceptual. Our wisdom realizing emptiness is non conceptual, but we do need to understand first on a conceptual level. We need to have the basics of that down. We need to know the structure of the path. It's like the same when you build a house, you know, you need to know all the nuts and bolts here. You can't just say there's the house, you know. You need to know all the structure, the way, the foundations, you know, everything, every part then makes the house. Same in the spiritual path. So actually, you can say when you're doing building, okay, I'm building my inner spiritual path here, you know. So in that way, the path to enlightenment's like that, you know. So we need to kind of, you know, slowly know these structures because it does help to clarify your understanding a huge amount, you know. So first one, we'll just go over these three and then we'll do a short dedication. First one is the root. What's covering our wisdom nature is an ignorance. What does ignorance mean? Not knowing. Any other? Not what else does ignorance mean? Mm? Can be aware of the wrong, yeah, it's kind of maybe aware of the wrong thing. Yes.
Confused. I like the word confused. Sorry.
Confused. Yep. Anything else? A refusal to know. Yeah, a little bit like that. And ignoring.
Yeah.
It's kind of ignoring. It causes us to kind of almost like ignore our fundamental nature, which is pure, clear, and stainless, and emptiness, selflessness. So it's quite nice to look at these words sometimes for a different way, because sometimes they resonate differently, you know. And not knowing, a lack of awareness of how things actually exist. There's a confusion, and ignorance blocks that. It's called an affliction. It afflicts. It's like a virus afflicts us. Ignorance afflicts our nature. It's spreading through our nature and confusing us, you know. Actually, we are on 11:30, so maybe we'll do the next two next week and then move into the four seals. You know, how do we move away? Because basically, what we're trying to do, not there, in this graph, not that one. They're not popping up so easy. So yeah, we're trying to move from confusion to reality. So the four seals are the ones opposite ones, you know, from moving from that one to that one. And again, many different methods in the Buddhist tradition to do that. But getting clear as what are we moving from, really getting disenchanted with that, fed up with that, and thinking, wow, I want to move there, and understanding all the benefits to move there. And ignorance is not bliss on the spiritual path, by the way. We often say ignorance is bliss, but, you know, are we blissed out all the time? No. Are the Buddhas blissed out all the time? Yes. So we want to go from, yeah, we don't want to, we're not buying into ignorance is bliss in this path, you know, and most of us know that anyway, you know. We always want to know stuff. Nobody wants to be in ignorance, you know. So that's where we're moving from ignorance to bliss in this path. And that's it. Yeah, we're using it, working through these four conceptions, wrong conceptions, and moving into what is reality, you know, what is our potential. All right. So let's just do, I don't think I pulled up it. Let me see if I can find, we'll just do a couple of dedications. So I just need to pull up my dedication prayer. I wasn't ready with retreat prayer book. Anyway, thank you for your participation, for good questions. And at the end of the course, I can send you the PowerPoints if that's helpful. Would a few of us like the PowerPoints maybe at the end of the course? Yeah. I mean, it just helps you to go over the sort of basic points, you know. So let me just share the screen share. It's not what we're doing. 3, 2, we'll go into the dedication. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the end goal, you know, to develop these two minds. Bodhicitta, which is, you know, a very precious mind, the one precious mind, bodhicitta, the compassion wing. It's grounded in compassion. That has the ability to, it kind of, that mind treasures all sentient beings when it's developed, has the power and ability to guide all sentient beings out of cyclic existence, has the skillful means to do that. So this is our goal. This is the compassion wing, and the emptiness is the wisdom wing, you know, that we're talking about in this class. So we just always dedicate to be able to develop both of those, and then we'll dedicate for His Holiness the Dalai Lama's long life. Chanju senju rinpoche magi panam gegirshi geba nyamba mebayi gone gondu pelwar shu toni taba rinpoche magi panam gegirshi geba nyamba mebayi Gone gondu pelwar shog. May the precious supreme bodhicitta, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. May the precious view of emptiness, not yet born, arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Then for His Holiness's long life, and for all of us who are practicing virtue, good heart, trying to develop our minds on the spiritual path, all our teachers, all the sanghas, all the practitioners, and, you know, anybody in the world who's benefiting, sentient beings, bringing them happiness, causes of happiness for their long life. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. All right. Thank you so much for joining online, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Thank you. Thanks.